Hey, welcome back. I'm gonna do some more live streaming this afternoon. Um, just keep going on this fantasy console. For those of you who haven't joined, I am the Code Mage. Sean Rakowski is my name, and welcome to my stream. Uh, if you haven't already, please click the subscribe button, as I plan on doing as much YouTube streaming and video content creation as I can. While I'm currently, this will be the second stream of the day, so I'm putting them, versioning them with the date and then the numbers. So where I left off, I was looking at what I'm going to do for scripting for this thing. And after looking around, I think IronPython makes the most sense at this point in time. Development. Here we go. You can tell I've streamed a little bit, but not very much, especially not in the last couple of years. So you can see, it didn't indeed pass that value in. So it seems like it's fairly fluid to go back and forth between IronPython and this. So I think I should be good with this as an example bit here. So what I have to do is then kind of like make it so that this code will execute as part of the core, but keep it kind of separate. So I have to kind of abstract this stuff away, because I think it'd be good to have multiple like code providers in the long run for this thing, all hitting the same API. So yeah. So let's go ahead and think about how we're going to do that now. So currently, memory is kind of where I'm putting everything. Although memory is obviously, so this is the static color palette, and then this is your display buffer that contains, the state of the what you're going to display. So I think what I might have to do here then is think of it as, now in a real computer, the code that you write is compiled down and stored into memory just like everything else. And then there's registers that keep track of where a pointer is to walk through the various instructions and feed them into the CPU. Obviously, this is not the case with a fantasy console. Really, it's a kind of like a self-contained game engine. But that doesn't mean we can't put it here. The other thing is we need to execute code from it. We need to probably execute an input and an update function on it, or sorry, a init and a function, and pass data into it from the overall engine state. So I wonder if this really makes sense here, or if I need to put another abstraction around this that actually represents the fantasy console as a whole, and start down that road. Plus, I also need to think about the fact that I need to swap between code executed that's provided by the thing, and then like the firmware, the actual menu system and stuff like that, or BIOS, if you want to think of it that way. I call it a fantasy console, so why don't we go and name it that? And this will become our entry point into it. And I'm going to pull, for now I've been pulling these in, these are the SNES viewport sizes. So I'm going to do some refactoring kind of as I go here as well. So instead of having the memory here, we will have a fantasy console. So we've got the fantasy console in there, and now we need to tell it to run. So technically will operate on its own. Now run isn't just run in a thread. I think it's going to be green threaded or whatnot, or it'll run in a single execution thread, which will happen on initialize. Yeah. And then there's so this will do like a standard boot up type thing, I think. And then on update, I'll tick. And I'm going to pass the elapsed game time into it. milliseconds. Because I will need a delta value for time, and I'm not gonna. I don't know if I should compute that inside of it. So and this is in definitely a game engine. So now one thing that's kind of interesting is that the draw is actually being called by the like it's not calling back into it. So there's no inversion of control here between like a provider. It just has to know based on this. So there's no like API into saying, hey, I could put another, provider on top of this. I think that's fine. I could of course change that later, so that the the engine itself, or the fantasy console itself, will call out to the provider to say, hey, I want you to draw this right now. And tick is kind of a false notion here too. This is really just an update function, but giving it decent names. Run maybe isn't, because that implies kind of a synchronous activity. Maybe we power it on. Now the thing is that do we allow the user to do their own draw function, or is that in a single update function? So I'm not sure what they do in stuff like Pico 8. Yeah, so they build the game loop into it with update, draw, and there's basically that's the standard thing for all game type engines, is there's an initialize, an update, and a draw. And I think it would probably be decent not to buck trends or think I'm smarter than these guys in terms of doing that. So tick will call the update function in it. I could call this fc dot, or I could have tick do the render after the fact, and this just stays the same. Yeah, I think I'll do that. Okay, so memory has a display buffer. There's a color palette. Now I could think of this as like a, you load up the, So if I have like the concept of a cartridge, I could have things like the sprites and everything loaded from that, and then the code loaded in. So let's go down that route. So what happens when you power on? The first thing that's going to have to do is look for the existence of some sort of maybe a cartridge. Well, that's the thing, is do we want it to, it probably wants to have its own operating system, right? So this is going to be more like and I don't think I would write that in Python or JavaScript or whatever. This would be very much a internal thing. But it should operate the same in terms of using the same drawing APIs and all of that kind of stuff. And it has to load in its own sprite. So it'll operate in similar fashion to like a cartridge, but it'll be more like your internal cartridge. So yeah, having like an internal or a replaceable one. Okay. Well, that's the thing. Is this like a computer or more like a console? Do you put in a game and do you install it? Is it more like a Super Nintendo where you just put the cartridge in, or is it going to be more like a Xbox where you boot it up and you might have installation, which is pretty much how most of these things operate. They know about the games that are in them. You don't have to drop something into them all the time, and that's probably the way to handle it. So it has to have the concept of some sort of file system in that case, which shouldn't be difficult. And I've been down this road thinking on this before, so that's not too bad. But I don't think I want to do like a command line based thing. I want this to be all menu driven, as best as possible. So let's think here for a second. What happens during power on? I think that it's got to put the execution to point to the proper program. So let's think about that in terms of, we have a program, and that's an abstract thing that needs to be loaded. And it doesn't get loaded into memory. And the other thing is that you can push programs on top of each other and then pop them off. So this is really a stack. But maybe we'll get there later. I don't think to have... Good. Do I even need to power it on? What does power on do in this case that I couldn't just do during construction? Nothing really. So just because I'm not going to need it. And generate a program. Does anything about this? Probably not. I think it's really need to know too much about the memory other than to get at the I'm going to create a folder here called programs for kind of internal stuff. I think that these will be your kind of like firmware programs. So this thing kind of acts like a facade. I know what I needed. There has to be like an initialize that gets called at some point in time. These ones are optional. Howdy, who's ever watching? Hope you're having a good night. Okay. So on tick it does an update and then it draws. Now this program needs to know about the API into it, so and that's really about affecting memory and then executing, doing certain operations and stuff like that. So so the program is the BIOS. Again, should be like a stack, really, but we won't do that until we need to. So here. I guess I could skip on the BIOS and just call it the OS, right? So the operating system starts up, call init on it. Ew, it doesn't really need to do... Just do that. Yeah, they did that already. Okay. So there's an update function and a draw function. So this is where we get into kind of the nitty-gritty of what it has to do. So like I said, I want kind of like a menuing system. And I did a little bit of this when I was doing, there's a fantasy console game jam that I never finished, but it was called FC85. Let me see if I can find a screenshot of that on Twitter. No, you're not going to see any of this, but so that's not mine. This was very much like a TI-83. Let me go and take a look at my Twitter account. Look at my media. How long ago was this is the question. And this brings back memories. All the little things I've tried to do over the years. Come on. Oh, here it is. So this is the menu system that was in it is very much like a TI-83 calculator, but very much menu driven, which is a system I actually really like, versus being more command line driven. So you know exactly what's kind of out there for you at any given time. But I can't remember what the... Okay, so this is what the main screen looked like, was that play, edit, and new. I think it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. The trick here, though, is that these are character cells, and I'm gonna have to get a character, like a display char buffer, figured out. Now there's a couple ways I could do this to make this happen. One of them is to have the rendering internal here, where I define the character display, and I say, okay, display this character in this particular row or column, and then at some point in time, dependent on the display mode, it will, as a step, it will basically copy do a render of what's in the character cell array into the actual buffer itself. Or I could have the fantasy console say it's in one mode or the other mode, and then the renderer on the outside will render the text or whatnot. I think it'd be better from the standpoint of just having, you know, standard values in here that I do that. What that means though is, and I had to do it in, I had to do it for that project, is that I had to store all of the data for these into the code somewheres. And what I'll show you what that looked like. Let me see here. Look at my repos. Okay, profiles. 88 was when I was thinking about this a few weeks ago and I was tinkering around. So this one was written in C, but the font here. So what I did is I stored every single value as a single, I believe this is a single byte. Yeah, so I stored each of these as 8 bytes, each one representing like the pixels kind of going down. So if you could imagine, you know, something like this. You have 8 of these. And then if you need to turn on, so and the interesting thing about the TI-83 and the character displays is that they don't use, you know, an 8 by 8 type grid like this. They actually use only the first like 5 or something like that, 5 bits to determine any particular text. So, but if you wanted to have, you know, any single number or whatever, I had it basically stored like this. So you could imagine something like a 4 being like that. And that's kind of how this was laid out in there. But you can see if you're doing the entire ASCII table, I mean, it's not too bad. But when I copy this into C# land, it gets really messy really quickly. Now, one of the things I could do is say, hey, I'm only going to support certain characters and symbols, so I'm not going to do lowercase. I'm only going to do uppercase, and then, you know, the top symbols like that you would need to do a menuing system. So things like you know, maybe like a colon or whatever. I think colon, maybe an equal sign. I think those are the numbers, and just go that route. Oh, I think I've got a triple dot here, ellipses. Oh yeah, huh. Now, I could have had this, instead of going across the top here, I could make the menu system so that play, new, edit, blah, 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 and then you go into play, and then this is, you know, the next menu up. So it's not so complicated as having, you know, tabs, which is really what this is. I like tabs, though. Tabs are kind of neat. So this is the way I know how to do it, so I think I'm going to try this. Although, I don't know if this font's really what I want. I wish I had it still. I had a tool that I used to actually go through and edit like the bitmap font text. So, but, well, let's just do it. I'm just going to create just like I have a palette. I'm going to make a chip thing for a character font. What's this font? All it is going to be, I can expand this as I go, as I find stuff that I need. I think I would need to do public, and I'm going to have to convert this. Sorry, private byte array, and it's really an array of arrays, but maybe I can get by with something else here. So this would be internally then. Each of these would be considered a new byte array. Can I do this in any way that makes more sense? Probably not. So really this needs to be an array of byte arrays. I think I should be able to do like this. Bravo. So this isn't going to line up. One of the nice things about this scheme in here is that these lined up really, really well to ASCII. So I can just take the character value as is in C# and just do a straight up conversion. I could try to see if this is too bad. Last time I tried this though, like, I don't know, it made Visual Studio basically barf. And I'm not sure why. I was trying to... It was just too big, I guess. I don't know. And maybe it was just how I copied it in there. And everything below Z. I could just do the first 128, which I think is all I really care for anyways. I guess I'd be missing if this is tilde or whatever. Yeah, I'll just copy it all. Why not? It doesn't seem to be having the same problems it did the last few times I've tried doing this. And I'm not sure what these values are. So if you're not familiar, if you hold Shift and Alt in Visual Studio, you can do this number, which is really nice. Where you put your cursor at the top front of it, and then you're able to essentially effectively enter stuff in across all lines, which is just awesome. Yeah, maybe this isn't as bad as I thought. Like I said, I think the last few times I've tried this, it's been awful. So, but this doesn't seem too bad. So what this would need to do then is I'd have to take each one of these characters and convert it into a, based on the type, I'd have to convert it into something that knows how to draw that rectangle, and then drop it into the display buffer based on the character cells. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, let me go take a look at how I implemented this guy. Which, this is really dense C code. So I have the... So that's kind of what I did here. So I had a... each character cell would have a value. So this is the actual, like, ASCII value of the byte that would be in there. So what I'm going to display. And then flags like, does this need to be inverted in color? So that's where you would get, you know, when you highlight something, you would set the inversion flag. And so as you're kind of going through here and doing this kind of stuff, each one of these values would, it would use those flags to determine whether that stuff is flipped. I think everything on the top here is what I need to know. A character size was 8 pixels tall and only 6 pixels wide. And so, which I think is consistent with this. So it would only use this much of the actual thing, and I think there was like one row that's saved for, or maybe 2 rows or 2 columns or whatever that was saved for. So maybe your 4 was actually more like this, stored in there. And then, this row in the bottom would be stored, or you might have 2 rows to just put the padding, so when you render it all out, it kind of looks nice or whatnot. So based on that, then, let's take a look here. We were giving our display a oh, my brain is fried today. Actually, my eyes have just been hurting. We gave it 256 width, so 256 divided by 6 for each character would give us an odd number, so that's not really going to work super well for what we're looking to do. We'd want it to be a multiple of 6 if we want to use this scheme that I already have kind of laid out here. I could expand that so that it's 8, and then it would work just fine. The actual one that you were seeing there, the FC85, which never really got done, that was only 96 pixels wide and 64 pixels tall, which is, that's a major constraint. But there's some cool stuff that people did on the TI-83 with that constraint. I mean, somebody did Doom on it, which, is pretty incredible, really, if you think about it. Obviously, they've got some color ones going on now, it looks like. So this is TI-84 plus C. I wonder what resolution, if they're still reusing that same resolution or not. I really like just the simplicity of like just how little you get on these, though. So this is what the TI-84 plus. So this one had 320 by 240, which is, I think, considerably more than what I have on this one. Sorry. Yeah. Do they keep the... So they must have got rid of that size. Oh, this is the CE model. Which did have the color. Yeah, so the Plus edition has the 96 by 64, which is what the other one did. 16 by X. Huh. I do think that it would be... Hey Scott, how you doing? Yeah, I just started streaming again after I ate supper and stuff. I could just double it, say, put it at 192. So 192 should be divisible by 6 then. And then, let's see, if I just double what my specs were here, which was 64, so just double it to 128 then. That shouldn't be too bad. That's probably going to blow up on me. Oh yeah, I disabled stuff, so cool. Then I think I can keep my cell display, character display cells correct. It would just be double what I had before. In this model. So that would be, yeah, I just hard calculated it here, which is what I should be doing there. The question is now, do I put the character buffer should probably be in a separate set of memory and then copied in. Oh geez, don't watch me on 65 inches. How's your new TV, Scott? Pretty good? Must be. So yeah, let's include this as character buffer, or text buffer we'll call it. And it will be width divided by your character width, which I said was 6. I could just say display width, and I'll just put that inside of there. I did choose Python for the scripting language, so I'm writing the actual engine of it in C#, and then I'm going to be scripting it with Python. So what'll happen is you launch this .NET application, and then the user will type up a Python program, hopefully, assuming all works as correct as I think it will, and then there'll be calls into it, so it will call on a init and an update and a draw function at different times that are defined within Python. And then Python will use an API that should hopefully be provided correctly to actually, affect the state of the fantasy console. So it will, through the API say, hey, take this sprite at, sprite location, blah, 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 and plop it into the display buffer, copy it over to the display buffer. And then, that's how you would draw something, and then, or clear the screen, and it will go and it will clear out the display buffer completely, or, print a character in this cell, and that's what it'll do. So Python is going to be used by the developers that are using it, at least to start. I want to make it so that Python would be just one of many potential options in the long run, but maybe like basic and JavaScript, and if I could get dynamic C# or dynamic F#, if I could build those things in, that would be pretty cool over time. But I got to start somewhere, I guess. And IronPython seems like it will work the way I'm kind of wanting it to. So that's the idea. What I am doing now is building out a character cell buffer, display buffer. Need a value, and then I need a set of flags probably. And I'm not being super consistent with, it's interesting. Do you ever, I wonder, do you, Scott, ever just totally just throw out your, when you're just hacking something together, do you throw out your standards like I do? Like, I wouldn't necessarily just hack together, production code like this. That's one of the fears that I have in the back of my head is people will assume that, oh, this is the way he always codes, and I don't really consider this super great, but like my style is pretty bad, and I don't know. Anyways, um, now it's width. This would be your display width. Okay. This is ridiculous. Yeah, that's not needed, but I feel better about having it there. Okay, so this will make an array that's x many wide with all the height. I really should flip these so that the height is first, and that you're going across, because you tend to go by height first. You do an entire row. I'm guessing it would be better to have all of those rows be inverted, and just in the way that you iterate through them to put them into stuff. It really doesn't make sense to do it this way, but that's an optimization. I can do that later. I don't think that's too big of a deal at this point. Um, I think in XY terms, not YX half the time, anyways. So, um, yeah. So we've got the display buffer, and what we need to be able to do with this is set and get display text rather, and then I need to have a operation where, I mean, there has to be like a display mode. Um, so how do I know which mode I am in? Because if I'm in the like a display mode or a vector mode, or I don't know what you would call it, graphing mode is what they use in the calculator. You would actually skip out printing the character cell, so there would be no operation to do that console swap. But if you're in display mode, then obviously you don't. Well, yeah, you wouldn't do that anyways. So the question is do these things actually belong, in their own submodule together because they work together, or should I have another chunk of memory that determines the mode that's kind of sits above these two, and these three things are just kind of together in the display. I'm not sure how all of this stuff gets put together, but your palette, I guess, is too. It's a chunk of memory that really, when you map it out, is just interesting. So you can actually edit these. I will eventually, I think. I've got this idea now that any chunk of these memories, so if you want to manually enter data into any one of them, so whether it be the color palette to affect that, or if you wanted to manually put data into the display buffer bytes, you could do it by just using a single function that touches whatever you want. As long as you know that the way that the layout is. The font, however, I suppose I could allow that, but I think that's not going to be editable. In theory, that belongs in here too. Let's just make it static. If I wanted to, I can make it so people could actually go in and, you know, this is all modifiable. So if they wanted to put a hex value or a byte value into here to make the text wrong, they could. That would be kind of neat. And this isn't static. So maybe that would be the appropriate way to do this. Just make everything public for now. Okay. So use information from the text buffer and this is font to to fill the display buffer, and use the palette display buffer in the palette to output the proper colors to the screen. So these two things are actually interpreted by the display. So I'm trying to think about these in terms of how they're used and if there's a logical order to them or not. But I think I need like a display control chunk of memory too. I don't know what I would call it. And maybe this display buffer isn't correct. Maybe it's more like a graphics buffer. I don't know. I suppose I could just make this a single byte for now and just do display mode. So based on the display mode, which I should just make an enum quick. So the cool thing about enums that I never knew is you can pick their storage class like this, or what they're stored as. So display modes would be either I need to think of a better mode name for that. I should look up what the proper term is for it. Apparently I've looked this up before. So text mode is a display that blah, blah, blah. It's got to be a subclass of something, right? Yeah, there's character memory and pattern table and a raster font is used, whereas the character represented by dot matrix. Blah, blah, blah. Consider a three-dimensional bit array, display matrix, text buffer, screen buffer, name table, tracks the character in each cell. Da, 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 da. text mode versus binary mode, is that right? Oh, that's for file IO. Text mode versus graphics mode. Perfect. It's not display mode, it's graphics mode. By default, display mode is going to be graphics. Which probably makes sense that next. Say at int x, y, you can get at xy dot value, set it. Okay. So we've got our ability to set our characters. It should also be an E. So put it up here for now. I had these mapped out in that other system as well, what these were. Maybe invert none, yeah. And these were fixed values, so they weren't really like flags. I guess you could clear a flag. Maybe I could just do something like this, none is that, and then what is it, flags? Is that how you do this? System dot yeah, okay. Now, interestingly enough, so there's actually 16 colors. I could either have it that black and white are known, or that they're dependent on, in terms of which mode you're picking when we convert. Okay, so based on the text value, the sys font, and then I suppose the palette can keep track of what color is used for text mode as part of its memory. And that would kind of make sense. But it happens kind of outside of the purview of the palette. So what's going to happen is it's not really the color either that gets stored there. It's the text buffer is going to say, okay, I need to, based on the display mode, text buffer is going to say, hey, print S to the first character cell. So S is going to be looked up in the sys font, which gives it a bitmap, a raster bitmap of just ones and zeros that say, hey, to make this a reality, this is this. And then it's going to copy that data over into the display buffer, into the first, 6 by 8 pixels that are in the character array. So that's how that's going to operate. But at some point in time, it needs to know what to set here. And I'm not sure that it's really the function of either of these to do that. So until I know what it is, I could do this. So like a char foreground, text foreground. And this should be modifiable. Not quite yet, but, well, we'll leave it like this. And so this is going to be 0. And text background. So what we're doing is building out a map of memory here. 15. Oh, sorry, 15, which should be the top value. Hard-coded, I know, but we'll change that later when we figure out what we're actually doing here. You're a little... That's my dog. He makes a lot of noise. So I tried to actually modify or edit OBS Studio to kind of drown out that noise, but he he didn't quite it didn't quite work the way I hoped. I think I listened to him a couple times on the stream this afternoon. Okay, so sysfont combined with text buffer to produce with the foreground and background. Text foreground palette index. Just want this to be very descriptive. Let's see what exactly it is. Which then gets dropped into the display buffer, and then the display buffer is used as a palette to output. So that's the combination of all these things produce the desired output that we're looking for. So now we just need to make this a reality. Did I say the foreground 0? I think the foreground should be a lot on top. It should be inverted. Sorry, just checking my phone quick. Okay, so to make this work, what we need to do is take the let's start up here. Fantasy console, power's on, it ticks, it updates, it draws. So draw is kind of interesting. So draw, I would think would gosh, it's like I feel like I don't need a draw because the update's gonna happen, the update's gonna happen anyways. So like there doesn't really need to be a proper game loop here. Of course, draw doesn't mean that just because it's there doesn't mean the user has to use it or the person has to use it. That's tricky. Tricky. Well, so let's do this. We'll just get it in here. If the men display mode text, then I need to operate on that, but it's going to happen after the draws. Text will always, if you're in text mode, it's always going to occur over top of any sort of drawing. So you could presumably draw some back stuff, and then the question is should text mode clear that or not? I'm not sure Maybe to start I won't have it. And we'll just see what emerges if there's anything useful there. So what we would do then in text mode is we would do that exact algorithm I talked about, but I'm gonna start just by putting it in here. So actually, let's just call it like copy text to display buffer. Okay, so what we'll do is we will go through is less than the buffer width. And again, these should really be flipped around because that's the way you tend to think about going across and then going down, not drawing them like this. Which means that from a memory perspective, the way that I structured the arrays, those should probably be flipped around, just as a matter of making things more clean. So I'm just going to say draw text. Just to keep these fairly simple. So keep it. Okay, so what we need to do is go to the memory, to the text buffer, and we will get the char. Change that. Maybe. Because we have to be able to get the flag too. We can make this public. Just let people know what this is. That's my wife saying, "What the fudge?" So she likes to use that instead of the F word, the normal F word. So anyways, so we're gonna get the sell out of this that location. We are then, based on the character cell, going to go to the font and look up bitmap equals font dot, and we'll just do a, did I call it? Oh, mem dot system. At the char cell dot value. Sysfont needs to implement. And I'm just going to keep this data at the bottom, even if it doesn't technically belong there. But so this returns a byte array. And this would be data at, okay, so that gives me the character bitmap, as an array of bytes. I must want to put a struct around that just to make it a little bit easier to deal with. In fact, it makes a lot of sense to do that. Probably. So we do a byte array data. And those are cheap because they're structs. In theory, I mean, I could, instead of making this, I should probably make this so that it's so that these are just those, and then just pass this in as the parameter. So just wrap this entire thing with char, but I'll do that later. It's not really essential to get where I want to go right now, but I will make a note of it. Maybe. Depends on if they're able to actually modify this stuff. Like I said, I think it would be kind of cool to make it so that you could modify any aspect of this memory, even if you shoot yourself in the foot. But a reset will always reset it. So, okay, so we've got the bitmap. And now what you literally would want to do here is to go through the width and the height of it. So, oh shoot, it's here. So maybe that should be considered your cell. It's the same thing. For bar equals 0 minus. There's got to probably be a better way than just iterating over these here. I mean, this is a pretty expensive operation if you think about it. Chart cell. Chart height. Then what we want to do is do something like this where we do, and this is where having the API come in would be better, but it would be something like mem at display buffer, mem display buffer at, now your X position is going to be the cell X, so this would be like your display X starting point would be like your cell X, so if it's multiplied by the number of pixels, which is your char width, that's like your starting point, plus X. And this would be dy equals cell y times your font height plus your which y position you're on. So that would get your actual pixel location. Pixel X, pixel y. Then you need to, in the display buffer, add pixel x, pixel y. You would set your, you're going to set it to either the foreground or the background based on whether your actual value is turned on. So we need to get from the bitmap the actual bit value, like at your XY value. So then you would say something like, if your bit is on, and okay, if your bit is on, and so there's really 4 cases. So your bit's on and inversion's off. I gotta fix this quick. I think there's a way I can do a bit array here instead of a byte array. That would actually make this a lot easier, but we'll see. For now, I'm just going to return 1, or true, and we'll come back to this. Okay, so you get whether your bit is turned on. At x, the xy coordinate. You also need to know whether char cell flags are inverted. So if it's inverted, what I can do here then is just flip them. I just realized I never got music going, which would probably be better, more interesting to listen to if I did. 1 second. Probably why my headset just decided to turn off on me. Let's see. Yeah, hopefully that's coming through now. Probably do this for a little bit longer. I just want to get a character displayed on the screen, and then I will call it a night. And I will probably be doing this tomorrow during the daytime, because I don't have anything to do right now, except for chores and helping my daughter with her work or whatever. So homework. Okay, so pixel at x and y is equal to, so bit is toggled on is really then it's not bit is toggled on, otherwise it's its original value. This feels like there's a better way to do this. Oh, so this has to be n. And then I'll just, I think I should be able to just cast this as a fool. If I'm not mistaken. No? Oh, is there an API to say is flag on? As flag. There we go. You can tell I don't use that very often. If the bit is toggled on, then we give it the foreground color. Otherwise, we give it the background color. text background palette index. Just realized it's not just the text index, because like if you're going to clear the screen, what do you clear it to? I suppose you just set it to 0. Whereas this could actually use any of the colors inside of the range, so maybe it's not. Maybe that is correct. Feels like there's a lot of cleaner ways to do this, but this is basically it. So the things I need to figure out here are the char bitmap. If getting this out of here. So this, and how do I tell that this is true? I think there's a thing in C# called a bit array. Which will make this a lot simpler, I think. We will just try it. So this is a 5-byte values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then this gets flipped into the bit, which says, so let's just make a bit array and see if this works exactly as we would think it would. So instead of this would be a bit array. Wait. Yeah. And then we will new this up here with data provided. And then we'll get there data at. Okay, so now this is where it gets a little tricky, because the index has to be calculated. So if you think about it, the way it was structured is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the width is 8. So it's y times 8, which is the number of bits in a byte, which is say bits per byte, plus the x value, how many bits we are over. I don't know why. You know what? Actually, I should be able to do this. Even in this one, size of byte, just like that. Yeah, that seems right. And then I feel like there's one more thing I need to do. I think that's all correct. Okay, so that all looks good. Let's go into here, and we will do a tick, which we'll call the draw internally. We don't need to do anything special with that. Let's just make sure this doesn't break first. And then I'm just going to manually try to drop a character in. Okay, so it's inverted. Everything is inverted, which it shouldn't be. Well, it is in text mode to start, but I must have the background and foreground backwards. So if the bit is inverted, then it's the opposite whether bit's on. If bit's on, then use the foreground, otherwise use the background. But, well, let's go through this and figure out why that's happening. So this should be the 0, 0 cell. Inside you've got, oh, invert is set on that. Why is invert set? Well, because there's no other value to be turned on to. Maybe. Perfect. Okay. And if we put in to our text, which I'm going to do out here. Let's see, m dot char, sorry, x buffer at x, which will be 0 and 0 equals. I should make a conversion for the cell to just go from char, implicit conversion. That would actually make this a lot simpler. So how I do that, I believe, is I come in here, say public static implicit operator from to a char, so char value c. I'm going to rename this to cell flag. I don't intentionally use an. Actually, no, I do use an explicit. You're right. I do use an explicit private declaration. I don't know why. I think it's either a force of habit or it might do that when I do a. Yeah, it's just force of habit. I don't know. I could stop doing it. Actually, the thing is if it's unneeded, it would make sense just to have like a static analyzer or something that would go through and clean it up. But I do waste cycles if you think about it doing that. So I've tried to break myself of that habit. But I think maybe what happens is that it feels cleaner when you put it next up to a public. Because then, like, let's just say you had this, right? Let's just say you had a public and a private version of some item. Just responding to Scott's comment here in the chat. Like putting them side by side, like that feels clean, but then this doesn't. Just, I don't know, there's something about it that feels wrong, and it's honestly just preference at this point. I know that it would waste time, but yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, if a style cop or something said, hey, don't do that, I'd probably listen to it. Let's see here. What was I doing before I got into that? Oh yeah, I was doing an implicit character thing just to make this easier. Yeah, so H1 E L. Oh my gosh, what am I doing this for? Doing a for loop because I need the index, and for each doesn't really work the way I want it to. In this case. And this is just throwaway here too. All right. Do I purposely rely on objects versus procedural? Yeah. When I'm doing this kind of development, game type development, or something that's supposed to be, I guess, modeling the internals of a computer system, it's easier for me to think about it that way. I mean, a lot of this stuff is just how it's combined anyways. I suppose I could take this entire exercise and run it where I split the data out more. I should have built a I should have showed you how I'm thinking about building an actual game engine, Scott, now, because there's this ECS model, and if you do it true, you really have to separate your data. You completely separate out the data from the actual operations and systems that operate over that data. So it's pretty neat. But in this way, I'm doing it as fast as my brain will let it work. Well, I got something on the screen. It wasn't exactly Hello World, but it's something. I'm guessing I'm not... Let's try a single character first and get that working before I do this then. Oops. Oh, well, yeah. Well, no, I did copy all those in there. Okay, so why does H look like that is the question. It's probably the way that I'm accessing the bit array. Because, so, in the engine, here, so 1 is false, 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 true is 3. Really, 1 should be false. So I think it's just the way that this data is constructed in here. Unless it centers it. Maybe it's the way that I implemented. I'm going to try flipping these around just to see how it comes out. See if it gives any more clue. Nope. That's weird. That should have had an effect. So it's the size of a byte. Oh, there should be. Unless these aren't 8 that I'm doing. It's closer. No, those are bytes. So why am I off by a little bit then is the question. You can see it's trying to get the H. It's just like, it should be buddied up to the end here. So it has to do with the offset then and where I'm placing it in the pixel X. It's probably the order operations here. Into... No, that can't be right. No. Character race 6, so... Oh, could be the endianness of the... I might need to invert the way that I'm looking at the text. I'm not sure how this bit array interprets the data that comes in here. So I believe that if I were to take something like H, so let's just take an H. So 8080 or 88, if you do this in Notepad, is 8 would be 100 like this, and then 1 0 0 0 like that. And then you'd have the same until you get to the F8. 3 of those, then you get F, which is 1 2 3 4, and then you get 8 like that, and then you get, so this is how the bit is actually laying out in the data. But what's happening, I think, is that it's starting here, or no, is it's only doing maybe this first 4. And so that would kind of happen if this was flipped, maybe. I guess I could try doing this the old-fashioned hard way. Which, let's just plop a different one where I'm not using a bit array. This probably does some... I bet this is an object, or this isn't a struct anyways, so I'm guessing it would do some unwanted allocation anyhow. So in this case, I would take the y byte, and then I would take... there's like a... So x would be between 0 and 8 in terms of position, or it'll be between 0 and 6 actually. What is the best way to do that? Is the question. To get the actual bit out that I want. I think in the other one, what I did... I've got to just have this backwards. I think in here I kept I kept masks, a mask for each one to get the value out of it. You want to see some old code, man, or not old code, some C code. This is fun. Do you ever write C, Scott? I don't know if you're still watching, but oh, you might be. There's one viewer out there somewheres. Oh, see, I've already done this stupid logic already. So I get the font character, and then I am anding it with 8. Oh, okay. So I flip the topmost bit, and then I'm... Oh, that's brilliant. Why didn't I think of doing that now? So I take the topmost, I take the value here, and then I OR it, I believe. Is that what I did? No, ANDed it. AND it with 8. 0x8, 0. Moved over by x. Then I AND it. And I have to take this whole thing and basically convert it to a Boolean. And that works. I just have to say is there. Hey, there we go. There's the H. Which should mean, if I flip this back to, that should work. Hey, there there it is. Beautiful. Now let's see if invert works. Based on the way that I did this, I suppose I have to get yeah, invert works just fine. Awesome. So that's what I wanted to achieve tonight. Gosh. Push that up, and I think we're going to call it good for the night. So hope you're keeping busy. If you didn't land a new job yet, Scott, I think I'm going to call her good for tonight. I will probably be back streaming again tomorrow at, I'm guessing, sometime between 8 and 9 o'clock a.m. We'll probably go until 11-ish, and then I might pick it up again after maybe noon or 1. Said I'm kind of on a hiatus from regular gainful employment, so it'll be fun working on this while I search for my next gig. Unless I can make YouTube my next gig, which I'm way far from that. So anyways, I guess to anyone listening out there, have a good night.